This is African American History is American History. Welcome. I'm your host, Harlan Kearsley. This program's goal is to foster understanding, promote discussion, and expand knowledge through stories of historical events, bios of unsung heroes, as well as timely and relevant news stories which, hopefully, will paint a vivid picture of the effects of segregation, discrimination, and bigotry on the lives of both blacks and whites. Comparisons will be made between the many racially fractured periods of American history and what's going on right now. On March 2nd, 1770, a fight erupted between a group of Boston ropemakers and 3 British soldiers. The conflict was ratcheted up 3 nights later when a British soldier looking for work entered a Boston pub, only to be greeted by furious sailors, one of whom was Crispus Attucks. Details regarding what followed are a bit sketchy, but that evening, a group of Bostonians approached a guard in front of the customs house and started taunting him. The situation quickly escalated. When a contingent of British redcoats came to the defense of their fellow soldier, more angry Bostonians joined the brawl. Unfortunately, Crispus Attucks was one of 5 men who were at the front of this huge free-for-all when the British opened fire. Crispus Attucks was the first of 5 men killed as 2 ricocheted bullets hit him square in the chest. Despite laws and customs regulating the burial of blacks, Crispus Attucks was buried in the all-white Park Street Cemetery, along with the other honored dead. The citizens of Boston observed the anniversary of the Boston Massacre in each of the following years leading up to the Revolutionary War. A Crispus Attucks Day was inaugurated by black abolitionists in 1858, and in 1888, the Crispus Attucks Monument was erected on the Boston Common, despite the opposition of the Massachusetts Historical Society and the New England Historic Genealogical Society, which simply regarded Attucks as part of an unruly mob that forced an unfortunate situation. Nevertheless, Crispus Attucks became immortalized as, quote, the first to defy, the first to die, end quote, and is, to this very day, considered America's first true martyr. Quote, the first to pour out his blood as a precious libation on the altar of a people's rights, end quote. This is African American History is American History. The terms trailblazer, pioneer, barrier breaker only truly apply to a handful of people throughout American history, and Judge Jane Bolin is definitely one of them. This unsung hero was not only the first African American to graduate from Yale Law School, but also the first black female to pass the New York State Bar, and the first black female judge in the United States. A strong defender of civil rights, Jane Bolin had an unblemished 40 years on the bench, dispensing fair but strong-minded justice. This is her story. Jane Matilda Bolin was born in Poughkeepsie, New York on April 11, 1908, to an interracial couple. Her mother, Matilda Ingram Emery, was an immigrant from the British Isles. Her father, Gaius C. BOLIN, was an attorney who was the first black president of the Dutchess County Bar Association. He was also the first black person to graduate from Williams College. Jane was the youngest of 4 children. Gaius BOLIN cared for the family after his wife's illness and death, which occurred when Jane was only 8 years old. She was strongly influenced as a child by articles and pictures of the extrajudicial hanging of black Southerners in the official NAACP magazine, The Crisis.
I was horrified and transfixed by pictures and news stories of lynchings and other atrocities against blacks solely because of their race.
Growing up, young Jane faced a great deal of discrimination in Poughkeepsie. She would often be subjected to racial prejudice in school, as well as being denied service at businesses.
Poughkeepsie is fascist to the extent of deluding itself that there is superiority among human beings by reason solely of color, race, or religion.
After attending high school in Poughkeepsie, she was prevented from enrolling at Vassar College as it did not accept black students at that time. So, at 16 years old, Jane BOLIN enrolled at Wellesley College in Massachusetts, where she was one of only 2 black freshmen. Having been socially rejected by the white students, Jane BOLIN described her college days as mostly sad and lonely.
I am saddened and maddened, even nearly half a century later, to recall many of my Wellesley experiences. But my college days, for the most part, evoke sad and lonely personal memories.
She and the only other black student decided to live off campus together. A career advisor at Wellesley College tried to discourage her from applying to Yale Law School due to her race and gender. In 1928, while enduring tremendously overt racism and social isolation, she graduated from Wellesley College in the top 20 in her class. She then enrolled at Yale Law School, where she was the only black student and one of only 3 women. In 1931, Jane BOLIN became the first black woman to receive a law degree from Yale and passed the New York State Bar examination in 1932. She practiced with her father in Poughkeepsie for a short period before accepting a job with the New York City Corporation Counsel's office. In 1936, Jane BOLIN ran unsuccessfully as the Republican candidate for New York's 17th District State Assembly seat. In 1937, BOLIN was appointed Assistant Corporate Counsel in New York City's Law Department. This was where she made the most inroads in battling racial inequities by going after private employers to hire people for their qualifications rather than discriminate against their color.
We have to fight every inch of the way, and in the face of sometimes insufferable humiliations.
Despite having lost the New York State Assembly seat, Jane BOLIN's hard-fought campaign boosted her reputation in New York politics. On July 22, 1939, at the New York World's Fair, then New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia appointed the 31-year-old Jane BOLIN judge of the Domestic Relations Court.
Well, as time went by, I was embarrassed by it, because it was years after I went on the bench before another African-American woman went on the bench.
20 years, in fact. For 20 years, she was the only black female judge in the entire country.
My name is Gilbert Cargill. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I've had a love of flying ever since I can remember. So in June of 1941, I began taking aviation courses given by the Civil Aeronautics Administration. These courses were designed to furnish pilots with the skills they would need for the U.S. Army Air Corps. Upon completion of my course in November 1942, I received a letter from the Army Air Corps base at Maxwell Field, Alabama. asking me to report on December 1st, 1942, to take further training in the Army Instructor School there. But when I reported to the field, I was not permitted to enter the school.
Something I can do for you?
Yes, I'm looking for Mr. Feast.
That'd be me.
Oh, hello. I received this letter to report to you today. Is there a problem?
Yeah, big problem.
Sir?
Obviously, somebody in the missions made a mistake. 'Cause you're a Negro.
Yes, sir, I know.
No need for the smart attitude, Cargill. Obviously, whoever wrote this letter thought you were a white man.
And?
Negroes are simply not trained here. Sorry. Looks like you came all this way for nothing. Good day.
Mr. Feast, this is clearly a case of discrimination.
Are we going to have trouble? Am I going to have to call security? I said good day.
This is African American History is American History. In 1871, the state of Georgia passed an Anti-Treason Act. This was a statute that made sedition, the conduct or speech that incites people to rebel against state authority, a capital crime. Now, the sentence for violation of the Anti-Treason Act was death. This law was never enforced until 1963. By July of 1963, the small town of Americus, Georgia, became famous when 4 civil rights workers, 1 black and 3 white, were arrested for registering blacks to vote. The Americus Four, as they were called, were all charged with sedition and faced the death penalty. From the late 19th century well into the early 20th, Bert Williams was one of the greatest entertainers in American history. Yet today, most Americans have never even heard of him. Back in a time when racial inequality, segregation, and stereotyping were commonplace, Bert Williams quietly pushed back against racial barriers, becoming the first Black American to take a lead role on the Broadway stage. During his 3-decade-long career, Williams made a living on stage and screen as a black man portraying a white man who was portraying a stereotypical black man in blackface. Williams is also credited as being the first black man to have the leading role in a film, Darktown Jubilee, in 1914. And he was by far the best-selling black recording artist before 1920. In 1918, the New York Dramatic Mirror called Bert Williams, quote, one of the greatest comedians of the world. His years with the Ziegfeld Follies not only brought him worldwide notoriety, but a salary that eclipsed his white colleagues, which included Fanny Brice, Eddie Cantor, Will Rogers, and W.C. Fields. However, because of his color, Bert Williams would typically be forced to travel, eat, and lodge separately from the rest of his fellow performers.
People sometimes ask me if I would not give anything to be white. I answer most emphatically, no. How do I know what I might be if I were a white man? I might be a sandhog, borrowing away and losing my health for $8 a day. I might be a streetcar conductor, $12 or $15 a week. There is many a white man less fortunate and less well-equipped than I am. In fact, I have never been able to discover that there was anything disgraceful in being a colored man. But I have often found it inconvenient in America.
This is African American History is American History. Just what is an unsung hero? Well, the standard dictionary definition is a person who performs great acts of bravery and or self-sacrifice, yet is not celebrated or even recognized. Throughout the civil rights movement, there have been many unsung heroes, but few were as important or influential as political activist Ella Baker. She was truly the spine of the civil rights movement.
Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest.
I'm Harlan Kearsley. On behalf of everyone here at African American History is American History, thank you for listening. And remember, none of us can truly embrace the future until we first confront the past. African American History is American History. Copyright H.C. Kearsley, 2023.